What do you do with the first couple seconds of the Instagram live? You just hang out. And wait for everyone to filter in, you know? Open the tea gates. Yeah. And then we know the tea gates are open once Jeremy says hello. Hi, Jeremy. How's it going? Hi, Ace Lighty and Steven. How's it going? Yeah. I hope you guys are doing well this day. It's Saturday, isn't it? I have no semblance of weekends, but we will soon. It's gonna be incredible. Welcome to day 39. 39 days we've spent together. Oh my god. Especially you, Jeremy. You've just gone every single day, and we really appreciate that. I should have just taken that, you know, as the first. That's how we start the stream, is when Jeremy says hello. Anyways, we don't start until Jeremy isn't here. So welcome to day 39. Wow, I was excited to end it when we decided we were going to end it on day 40, and now I'm kind of like, oh, like I don't want to stop doing the daily lives, but we have to do some other tea stuff, and but this has been really, really fun. I hope that we have a nice couple last days together. I wanted to pick something today that crammed a lot of kind of just stuff I've learned from the tea journey today. So I was digging through our stash for like a good half hour, like, what are we gonna do today? Like, it's like not the last day. We have something planned for tomorrow, thank goodness. But it's like the second to the last day. What can I do to just deliver as much as possible now that we're not going to be doing dailies next week? And we chose a discussion about terroir and tea making through the use of something really, really interesting. This is the tea that we'll be drinking today. I'm not sure if we'll finish it or not. If we do, we have another one. But the tea we'll start with is can you guys guess? If you guys were not on the Discord where I announced the tea, it looks dark. What is it? Can you guys guess what it is? Steven, Steven knows what it is. I'll give you a hint. It's a tea that's not from a region it's usually coming from. This is from a tea region that's usually known for green tea only. It's not something you usually find from there. It's something that's often made in Taiwan, and now it's grown and made in a country that Taiwan really likes because they colonized Taiwan in the 1900s. Can you guess what it is? Okay, it's a Japanese oolong. So it's an oolong tea. And, Taiwan's famous for oolong tea. China are like the main regions where oolong tea is produced. But there's not a lot of oolong going on in Japan. And Japan is mostly known for green tea. And not only are they mostly known for green tea, most of their production is in green tea. I think upwards of like 95%, even 99%, I bet, by some measurements. You're dealing mostly with just mass-produced green tea for bottled tea use, or grocery stores, or, sencha and stuff like that. The artisanal part of the Japanese market is quite small in itself, let alone these weirdos, okay? So that's why I picked this tea today, because there's a lot we can unpack from this one tea. We can talk about terroir, we can talk about cultivar, we can talk about processing, we can talk about tea making exchange, and I'm lucky to have been able to travel across a lot of different tea regions and kind of see how they cross-pollinate. So I'd like to discuss that stuff with you today. And so if you are interested in exploring these weird teas and interested in getting to know why they exist, there's some things we can talk about, and I can help you, I guess, better pick which ones are a little bit safer. The danger with these kinds of teas is that they're interesting, but sometimes they're hit or miss. So we'll actually see how this goes today. I've never had this tea before. I tried it with the vendor when I first bought the tea, and then never again since then. So this should be interesting. I don't know if there's going to be a hit or a miss, but regardless of what the quality is, we'll be able to talk about it. Yeah. Jeremy says it's easy. How come you didn't say anything then, Jeremy? Camellia Blends, welcome. Eric, welcome. Eric, we were thinking about doing heicha, but I didn't have enough time to panically text Eric from Tea Sleuth. Eric, we're doing heicha today. So we didn't do a heicha today. That's okay. Dr. Felix, tea for a bibliophile. Yeah, and Tea Blossom, welcome. How's it going? Bonsoir from far away. Sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. Yeah. Dr. Felix says, definitely try Wakocha one day, a black Japanese tea. Unless you already tried it. I have, but just a couple is not enough, you know? I still want to try more Wakocha. And let's start with that frame of thought. Even if I've had some Japanese black teas, okay, I can't say that I've had very many. I think I've had more than the average person because I do like to explore these kind of weird teas and one-off teas. But the thing with these kinds of teas that are from a non-typical region, let's call it non-typical region. It's an oolong from Japan, right? How this comes about is not going to be a easy road. It's not a straight line. Whereas with sencha, there's like one guy who developed the sencha process, and then there are factories that are very similar because only one company develops the same machines over and over again that make sencha, and then they talk to each other about sencha. There are like farming techniques that are accepted about sencha. There are sencha making competitions. There are sencha research, like when the tea research institutes in Japan study green tea, they're probably studying sencha. So you have this whole industry that's centered around one particular style of making tea. So it's pretty consistent. If you go talk to someone Shizuoka in Japan, or you go down to the south, talk to someone in Kagoshima, and you say sencha, they'd be like, okay, yeah, I do this. We pick the leaves with this machine. We use this machine to steam it. We use this machine to dry it. We use this machine to vacuum pack it. It's very consistent. So while, you know, in a way it's boring or typical, it's more solid. You're more likely to get a really, you know, just nice solid product that's not going to go wrong so much, right? With these guys though, it's almost like, hey, where did this person who made this oolong study oolong tea? Did they go to Wuyishan? You guys know Wuyishan's where Wuyi rock oolongs are from, right? Did they study oolong in Anshi, where Anshi Tigonian, Iron Goddess, is from? Or did they go to Japan? I mean, did they go to Taiwan, where, you know, Taiwanese high mountain oolong is rolled up and balled? Or baozong? I mean, this looks like a baozong to me. See? So, right? Doesn't it look like a baozong oolong? That's rolled up kind of leaf material from Taiwan. It could also look like a really lightly roasted wuyi or dansong. How does it smell like? Oh wow, it smells very Japanese. The closest thing I can think of is, I guess like a baozong from Taiwan. It's very aromatic, but vegetal, but also it's got that super floral fragrance that reminds me of a dansong. So I'm willing to bet that they don't have the machine that the Taiwanese use and the Fujian people use to make Iron Goddess, because it's a particular machine they need to make those little tiny pearls. They're really tightly rolled oolong balls, so they don't have that. That or they don't know how to use it, because you can actually mess those up pretty easily. I once tried making Taiwanese style oolong in Nepal, and I tried to direct the people who were making the tea based on what I'd seen in Taiwan. And, you know, I'd taken down notes because I knew I was going to Nepal from Taiwan. I'm like, I'd taken down notes and like, hey, what... I asked my teacher, what do you do when you do the back and forth between the machines so I can teach these people in Nepal? And she gave me the kind of like, 1 minute here, and then, you know, 80 degrees here, and then 120 degrees here. But because they're two different places, Taiwan is what? It's very hot, it's humid, it has the ocean influence going on, so the leaves are very soft. In Nepal, you're up in the, you know, in the Himalayas, right? You're high elevation, it's really dry up there, there's no ocean influence at all. The leaves were a lot drier, so they got more crinkly before they got shaped, using the Taiwanese timings. So it's really interesting that, you know, even if you've taken like a really, really well-practiced tea maker and you put them in your region, they may or may not be able to replicate their tea making skill there unless they're that good at reading the leaves because of the difference in cultivar, environment, etc. So that's why it may or may not be a solid tea. tea when you pick these kind of like one-off teas. But are they interesting? They're really interesting. So, yeah. So first steep of this Japanese oolong, for those of you who are joining us. Again, we picked this tea so we can talk, all about, tea making and tea culture and cultural exchange and how the environment and even the person who's making the tea will influence the outcome of the tea. And now what I'm curious about is, where did this Japanese tea maker study oolong tea? He might not even have been to another region, actually. He could have just called someone or had a friend, he might have an Instagram. A lot of tea makers have Instagrams these days. And he might have met someone from Anchi or from Taiwan, and they, hey, how do you make oolong? Hey, try this. Who knows? But oftentimes they'll actually travel to the farm and try to understand how to do it, or they might take a workshop. Some countries will host like cultural exchange tea workshops. So first impression is, I can tell there was a problem with processing the tea. I'm not trying to be a smart ass, okay? I'm really not, but there's a processing issue in the tea. Steven, can you taste it? I want you to taste it. It's an issue. Yeah, it's just an objective flaw. What do you think it is, Steven?
Didn't dry it enough.
What?
Could they not dry it enough?
Yes. Okay, so Steven says they didn't dry it enough. And I'm not sure if it's the drying. I was actually thinking about the withering. But there's too much moisture inside.
Water content, yeah.
There's too much moisture inside the tea. And what I mean by that is, when you drink it, there's this really distinct like grassy green taste that you get from things that tend to age very poorly over time. So what's happening is that when a tea maker is working with tea leaves, one of the most important steps is the withering process. So they need to remove all the water from the leaves and stuff like that. But in Japan, they don't need to, because they're making green tea, right? And they put the leaves through like a steaming process. So they're less likely to be super detailed about the removing of the moisture, because they steam the leaves, which in itself is a process that is high humidity, right? And that's the reason why a lot of the Japanese green teas will tend to have a kind of like grassy taste, and if you don't store them properly, they're going to like kind of go stale over time. So this, to me, if I took this to a Taiwanese or Chinese tea maker, they would probably say, this is good, but you need to remove more of the water so that it can last a longer time. Now, remember, I'm not a tea maker, okay? I'm a girl who's been to the tea farms a couple times, and I've made tea, and I try my best to pay attention. I'm not the tea maker, okay? This person makes much better tea than I do. So whoever you are out there, I'm not trying to diss on you. I really promise this is a really good tea. But the first thing that I noticed is that tiny bit of kind of, it's like an objective flaw that I bet if we oversteep this, it's going to get better. So let's try that. So one of the best things you can do when you're dealing with tea quality, like you want to just see how well the tea was processed, just hit it with boiling water. And I've gotten a lot of kind of like, what, Ray? Like, do you really want to say that about Japanese tea especially? I'm not saying it's the best way to brew tea. I'm never going to say that. I do really like using hot water as much as possible. But if you want to test just how objectively good a tea is, just abuse it. Just put boiling hot water in it for as long as possible, and the flaws will come out, okay? But is it a really good tea? I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it's really, really, really tasty. And I bring that up not so much to criticize the tea maker, absolutely not. I'm just bringing it up as a way to comment on the idea that Japan, the oolong practice, like the practice with oolong techniques, may not be as excellent as like a place that does oolong all the time, right? Like if Ronan, and I don't know, Ronan, do you cook? But Ronan's I think you're in Belgium, right, Ronan? If the two of us got challenged to a, French cooking Belgian pastry competition, who's gonna win? Even if I study, and even if we went to culinary school, I'm just not going to win because I don't have the practice personally, you know? So Ronan says, I have a Japanese oolong baozong style, but you have to brew it like a Japanese green tea. Otherwise, it's too strong and very bitter. So really interesting. It's like a combination of different knowledge. Yeah. And it's not like I want the Japanese tea makers to make tea like the Taiwanese tea makers. I just really do honestly believe they can make the tea taste better like that. If they can just make it in such a way that the objective parts of it are you just you know, I don't know. Because then you'll allow the second part of it, which is that the tea is supposed to capture the environment of the place and the tea maker's personality, right? But what's getting in the way is this extra moisture in the leaves that for me is like, man, I bet if I oversteep this or if I let this tea sit for a long time, it's not going to age well. But wouldn't it be awesome if this oolong was processed well enough that it could age a long, long time, right? Like, and you could see how it would age like a regular Taiwanese oolong or a Chinese oolong. Wouldn't that be interesting? But instead, what would happen, and why I point this out that we need to just be aware of is, you know, if I wasn't aware that maybe it was just a processing flaw, I might jump to the conclusion that, oh, Japanese oolong can't age because it's worse than Chinese oolong. You know what I mean? Right? It's like, oh, the Japanese can't make oolong because I see this a lot. The soil isn't good for that kind of tea. I heard this a lot thrown around with the American tea growers here in the United States, that a lot of like high-end tea tasters would say, oh, you know, America's soil is really bad and the teas turn out really poorly and I don't think our terroir is good for tea. I'm like, that's bullshit. There's no. It's not that America has bad soil. It's just that we're Americans trying to beat Ronan in a French pastry competition. You know, we don't have the practice in the States to make good tea. So I'm going to snipe Henrique, who just popped in. Henrique is from Brazil, and they have Brazilian tea over there that's influenced by Japanese culture, because Brazil actually has one of the biggest Japanese populations outside of Japan. And so if you look at the Brazil teas, they got the Japanese influence. But are they as exposed to like the intense research and tea making, like just detail orientation in East Asia? I'm guessing not. The Brazilian teas are really, really, really good. But then someone might be tempted to taste the tea and it doesn't come out right. And you'll be like, oh, Brazilian tea isn't very good, period. Because maybe the place is not good. And China's this magical tea land where like tea bushes are just better in China. And that's partially why you have that kind of, you know, I have to point it out, like Chinese tea drinkers will sometimes just not want to drink other things because they're just not as good as Chinese teas. Sometimes it happens a lot with like, let's say, higher and pu'er. I mean, they're dealing with really, really good leaf material there. But it's not that China's this magical tea land, it's just that these other regions don't have yet the practice and techniques to make tea that excellent yet, you know? Just stuff to just, you know, be aware of. And what's great is that those things are small adjustments that will be easily fixed once they have a couple more seasons practice, or they go and, you know, study for a season with someone else who's making tea. And then on the flip side, I'm not trying to, like, again, I'm not ragging on this oolong. It's very good. I've only had one sip of it. I need to drink some more of it. But does Taiwan have good green tea? I love Taiwan, but the green tea in Taiwan kind of sucks. Like, you never hear anyone talking about Taiwanese green tea. I actually have some, but I just never reach for it because it's just not very good. Now, does that mean Taiwan just sucks for green tea? I don't think so. I think it just means that they have focused all the efforts on oolong tea. They don't have enough practice doing really, really good green tea. And another cultural thing, the Taiwanese green teas tend to be copying Chinese green teas. You'll see like Taiwanese Dragonwell, Taiwanese Biluochen, you know, they haven't been able to develop their like very famous, distinct own Taiwanese green tea. So if you're trying to copy someone else, you're never going to be the best of someone else. You need to be yourself, right? So all that to say, I know there's a lot of like moving parts, and I hope that if something makes sense, you know, take it away. If not, you know, let me know if I can clarify something. Or again, it's not to rag on the tea. There's just so much like to be aware of when we're dealing with these weirdo teas, but they're really excellent, and I don't want people to discount them. That's really good. Yeah. It's very floral. It's very fragrant. One thing that's throwing me off is that little bit of sourness and bitterness that Ronan is probably just forecasting. She has, again, that Japanese oolong, that's Baozong style, that she says you have to brew like a Japanese green because it becomes very strong and very bitter. So this tea would just be treated a little bit better with slightly cooler water, I think. So that's on me too, to just adjust for the tea. I'm not demanding that every tea be perfect and stuff. It's just a discussion. And yeah, I can just see the potential of this tea. This is not even the peak of this tea, and it's very good. You know, that's very exciting. Now it tastes... Would you say it tastes more Chinese, Taiwanese, or Japanese, Steven? Yeah. So please, please do try these oddball teas, as long as you're going into it knowing some of these complexities and what's behind them. Yeah, they're really fun to explore. I'm a big fan of just off the cuff, not typical origin teas, because there's just so much potential in them. Yeah. You want to know what oolong can do in Japan. You want to know what oolong can capture with the Japanese environment. And no matter how amazing the Chinese or Taiwanese tea maker is, no matter how many awards, how many generations, you know, they've done tea, they cannot make their oolong tea taste like it's from Japan. They cannot. There's something unique to every single place that cannot be copied by anyone else, no matter how much of a genius they are. So this Japanese oolong has something you cannot find in a Chinese oolong, and that's why I like this. People will say, "Oh, why do Japanese oolong when you can just have a Chinese oolong that's made really well?" It's like, well, there's something there that's not in the Chinese oolong, and that's not in the Japanese green tea either. It's a different process, you know, different expression. Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna sip this. Too much talk, not enough tea drinking. It's like a cardinal sin. Eric, I saw you're talking smack in chat again. I should respond to Eric's smack talking faster, because people might assume that we're not friends, Eric. That's a problem. You and I know that we're friends and we can smack talk, but people might actually think I'm a smartass. If you haven't already thought that I'm a smartass. How are you guys doing today? That was a lot. I'm really passionate about this stuff. I really, really like off-the-cuff, strange, new, and experimental teas. I like tea experiments, so I have a lot of just respect for these kinds of strange, odd teas. And you have to remember that these teas are, you know, they're more difficult to sell sometimes in the market. They're more of a risk. The person making the tea is spending money and time and energy to make a tea that is less easy to sell, and may not work out because something might be wrong. It might just not taste good, and it might invite criticism or whatever, especially in a place like Japan where people just like to do what, you know, it's a very just, you know, go by the standard. You want standard, but at the most excellent level, you know? Going off the cuff and then a little bit weird is like, why do that? Both just as a practice, and also financially speaking, it's less rewarding in that way. But for them, you know, it's fun. Yeah. I am not saying hello to people fast enough because I keep being a smartass. Mindful Teas, welcome. Henrique, we called you out earlier. Bowser's Beauties, Cha Chai Tea, Perennial Tea Room, Dino Lencioni, welcome. And by Megan McCann, welcome. Ronan says, I have an oolong from Nepal. Apparently they bought Chinese machine to make it this year, and they decided to do a Tieguanyin style. roasted, hard to make it right. It comes from so long. Tradition in China, how could they succeed? Yeah. I've seen a farm in Nepal that I was talking about earlier on where they had the Chinese style machines. And yeah, it's very difficult because the Chinese tradition has so many tiny steps. It's really like, I've seen it a couple dozen times now, but there's just tiny adjustments that these tea makers make that I can't decode. Even, I can speak a tiny bit of processing Chinese. Like I can ask if this is oxidized, what time, how long, was it dried, any issues, problems, etc. Is there withering problems? I can ask those really basic questions in Chinese, but I'll ask like, oh, why did you decide to move the leaves from there to there right now? And they're like, there's too much water. How do you know? The smell. It's like, or touch it, just touch it. Can't you feel it? And they're usually very patient with me, which I'm really grateful for. But for people in Nepal who've never been to China to see it, not even once, some of these tea makers in these other areas have never even had teas from other areas, they've just never had the tea before. So how do they use those machines to make the teas that they either haven't tasted much of, or maybe they bought it online? I've seen that happen too. They buy the teas online, but they might not have a good example, so they don't know exactly what to be emulating when they're using those machines. But I have confidence that they'll be able to figure it out once maybe someone comes and helps them, or they just practice, because more than, people on Instagram like myself who are just drinking tea, those are tea makers. They might not know the objective techniques yet, but they know their leaves more than any of us here. So it's exciting. Just take some time. Seasonal mitigation. What about Korean oolong balyo cha? Well, number one, has Eric already said it's not oolong? Yeah. Our friend Eric, who's tea sleuth here, is a Korean balyo cha fanatic, and he's heading up the Korean tea buy for his friend Arthur Park. If any of you would like to ask about Korean tea, you should ask him. Is he on chat still? If he's not, you should go get him.
I don't know.
He usually hangs out on chat for a little bit. Yeah, he has really, really good sources of balyo cha. So seasonal mitigations, questions about this. It's an oxidized tea from Korea. It's called balyo cha. And from what I understand, it's not an oolong, because not only is it oxidized, it's also pile humidified like a yellow tea. You know how yellow tea goes a sweating process? I've never seen yellow tea being made, but supposedly yellow tea is different from green tea because you put it in a pile and then you put a cloth over it or something. I don't know. And yeah, they make it like a oxidized yellow tea. And that's balyo cha, and that's why it's not oolong, I guess. Eric, someone is asking about balyo cha. And yeah, that's another region that I think is often misunderstood, Korean tea. Korean tea is very expensive, and most of what we have in the market is not very good. So I find a lot of people are like, Korean tea, it's like Chinese tea but more expensive, or it's like Japanese tea but more expensive. I think for every single type of tea, what I've learned is if I don't like it, it's not because I don't like it, it's because I haven't found a good one yet. Even stuff I thought I would never like Steven didn't think he would like shopuer. What else did I not like? I didn't like Dansong for a long time. I didn't like Phoenix Oolong for a long time.
Dragon
Dragon Well was okay, but like I really liked it, but there was not that extra like, wow, you want a tea that like just, it's not just, because there's really, really good teas, like they're really flavorful, complex, you can write a whole tasting note about it, so much to unpack, but the extra that really makes a tea go from like really good, and I like it a lot, to like, holy shit, like that's amazing, is you have to have that flavor profile, but also the soul-moving aspect of it. I don't know how to explain it. Luckily, a lot of us here are into music or art. It's hard to quantify that, right? Like, how do you know when someone's playing music? It could be the same piece, the same instruments, the same time and place, but one person will play it technically well, and the other person will play it technically well, but that other person just has that extra something. Tea is like that too. And when you see it, it's hard to explain. It's like, wow, holy crap. You know? And because there's a lot of good tea, but there's an extra something that just, you're like, wow, that's just never going to leave me kind of thing. And I've had a lot of very complex and tasting notes and so much going on. Tea is, but it has to just move you, I think, for you to remember it forever and ever and ever. Yeah. Tanya Landia says it's all about what calls to you. Yeah, it's going to speak to you a little bit. I know it sounds really weird, but you know, like, oh, are you trying to say that tea is like, you know, it's gonna, it's, right? But we use it for food, where the food that speaks to you, it can't just be beautiful. It can't just be well garnished. It can't just have a fancy name. You gotta connect with it, you know? I find it, you know, funny that we can use that kind of language for food, but I think some people can, I felt this before too, you can get a little bit intimidated when this almost like spiritual, quasi-spiritual, esoteric stuff comes around about tea. But really it doesn't have to be spiritual necessarily. It's just, yeah, it really does speak to you just as a person, regardless of what you believe. It just calls to you, yeah. Which is great. What's something like that for you guys? Like a tea that's not just really, really good, but it just speaks to you. You hear it talking to you sometimes at night. Drink me, infuse. We have a lot of those teas, actually. It's kind of, you know, once I started noticing that certain teas had that quality, I started seeking them out now. So now we have quite a lot of teas with a lot of personality in our tea collection, which is fun. Ronan says, like, piano interpretation, shofi, is a magical, but how it touches you depends on the pianist. Yeah, correct. That's absolutely a really good way to say it. You can listen to the same piece, and the other pianist might even be better, just technically. Like, he can hit the keys better, cleaner, etc. But the extra something, like your mom, your grandma wasn't, you know, trained by a Michelin star chef or didn't go to cooking school, but something about her food, or if it's your dad or uncle or grandpa, you know, it doesn't have to just be your mom. Yeah. Seasonal mitigation. If you're still here, Tea Sleuth is back now. If you'd like to talk about the Korean group buy with him, if anyone wants to give Korean teas another shot, if you've been burned before by bad Korean tea, if you think Korean tea is too expensive for what you get, if you would like, you know, actually this year's a good year because the Korean producers and suppliers that Eric is helping just as a friendship thing, decided to lower their prices this year to like 2010 prices or something like that because of the COVID situation. So right now is a really good time to try those Korean teas. The prices will probably go up. They have to. It's just, they're not even making a profit off of them, which I'm like, guys, like, you're doing such a good service for us. Make some money off the tea. But they want us to fall in love with Korean tea, and Tea Sleuth, who's in chat, and the Korean group buy have really changed my mind about Korean tea. Like, it's not even close. It's almost like most other times I find a Korean tea that's outside of this circle, I don't want to drink it because I know it's still expensive, but it's not good. It's just, yeah, there's a part of the Korean tea market that's very heavily mechanized and is copying Japanese tea a little bit. I have never been to Korea, but that's what I understand from, you know, just attending a couple Korean tea conferences and drinking the tea. A lot of the more mass available Korean teas are not processed with the same standards that you would see from your Chinese and Taiwanese teas. So, of course, they're not going to be as good. But if you want, like, really high standard, really beautiful teas, man, every country's got it. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of practice, you know? We're seeing African countries like Malawi and Kenya and Rwanda come up with teas now. We found out there's a tea plantation in Madagascar. I didn't know that. And unfortunately, just because it's African tea and not Chinese tea, the price is very low. Of course, because the skill isn't there yet, but I can't help but think there's just some kind of like bias there. Because it's not made by Asian people. Tea should be Asian. And African countries can't make better tea than Asia, you know? It's almost like, oh, why would you go to a French bakery run by a Filipino girl, right? It's not going to be as authentic, you know? But I'm not saying everyone feels that way, but sometimes there's a little bias, right? When you walk into like a French pastry place, and people are speaking French, we're like, wow, like it's so authentic here. They're all French speaking. They're all francophones. There's that bias. But does it mean that someone from Indonesia or I don't know, Colombia can't make French pastry as good if they put in the effort? Of course not. All that to say, I think tea can be made really well anywhere. It just depends on the practice and the person, I would say. Seasonal Mitigation says the 80s shoe that they have is magical. I've never had a shoe pour that old. It's a long time. Jeremy says, I love how Eric just tuned back in for Korean teas. It's true. There's actually a project going on now in my home country, the Philippines. The same lady who does the ceramic bowl that I keep showing off to you guys. Let me do it one more time. Why not? That's another example of cross-cultural. Have you ever seen a tea bowl that looks like this? I really never have. Right, Steven? I just never seen a tea bowl look like this. This is a matcha bowl. But it's just completely different from any other tea bowl I've ever seen, made by a Japanese person, an American person, a Chinese person. It's informed by her growing up in the Philippines. This is by my friend Cheryl. And yeah, she too is wanting to make a tea farm in the Philippines. And, you know, borrow some styles from tea makers that know how to do it, but create their own style there. I say there, but that's me. That's her effort, though. So I'm excited. Hell yeah! Is it going to be good the first few years? Probably not. But it'll just take some time. You're paying your dues, you know. All these excellent Chinese teas. Their great grandma probably wasn't making very good tea. She had to figure some stuff out, you know. Lifetimes of value paid down from generation to generation. So I think it's not fair to compare a country where they've been making tea for, like, you know, great-great-grandma was making tea. Oh, but, you know, these Colombian people can't make tea. Like, it's so bad. Well, give them a couple generations. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Jeremy says the breast croissant in Montreal is made by Armenian immigrants. How do people feel about that? I feel like it's quite controversial. Yeah. This tea is very good, by the way. It's definitely a very outward-facing tea. It's not a tea that's requiring me to pay attention to it. It's actually doing quite well. I bet the leaves are not going to be that sturdy because of the withering. So I'm just going to double check to see what I said about the withering by testing the leaves. You can see if the leaves have been withered well, if they've got some like nice just silkiness to them. You see me do this a lot. They actually do have quite a nice silkiness to them. But it's not perfect. Again, not that I would do any better. We're just looking. I think it's fair for us as tea drinkers to do what we can to evaluate quality. Just don't, again, get a big head. Don't think you can go to Japan and be like, I could do it better than that guy. I've drunk so much Da Hong Pao. I've drunk so much Bao Zong. Tea making is so hard. It's just so difficult. No matter how many times it's just so difficult. Actually, the withering is quite nice. I wonder if it is like a drying issue. They didn't dry the leaves enough. Or something. Right? Not bad. I'm actually surprised. I thought they would have fallen apart a lot easier than that. Yeah, just do this to your oolong. And I'm not going to tell you what to think or what to say, but when you have an oolong, just do this to it. And then compare it to other oolongs and see what happens. You know? Just because we're far away from the farms doesn't mean we can't learn anything about how the tea is processed, how good it can be, you know? Play with your leaves a lot. we have to be humble, right? For a bibliophile, we definitely have to be humble. I mean, it's hard because I want us to be confident tea drinkers, right? I don't want us to shy away from making judgment calls. We need to make judgment calls. We need to have opinions. We have to learn. But I think what keeps us humble is being able to be wrong. Like if a Japanese tea maker popped in here and said everything you said was wrong, you need to be open to just throwing away the last half hour and saying, okay, tell us why, right? Or just having another perspective. I think you can be humble and confident at the same time. It's dangerous to not have confidence with how much we spend on tea, how much time we spend on tea. Because if not, how are we going to learn and how are we going to spread it to other people? I find a lot of us want to share tea with others, but we don't have the confidence to do it. We don't have the practice to do it. We think that, oh, tea making, they're going to think it's weird. Or maybe we tried and then we've gotten rejected before. Like, that happens to me a lot, where I'll do my best to try to share tea with someone, but then, it doesn't go well, so I don't want to do it anymore. So I just want to live in my tea bubble and not, But we have to build confidence, and yeah, so it's a tricky balance for sure, isn't it? You have to be confident, but not get ahead of yourself. I think that once you hit a certain pattern with tea, it tends to punish you if you're being not humble anyway. The moment that I get a little bit big-headed, like even just a tiny bit, thinking I know too much, the tea really, really strikes back. And I don't know how to describe it. I just, I'll say something that's out of line, and then someone who's there knows a lot more than me, and then I get scolded, but at least I can accept it. But of course, no one likes being wrong. No one likes being catastrophically wrong. I've been catastrophically wrong before. But yeah, I think it's okay. So sometimes I feel nervous talking about these teas I'm talking about a lot of processing and cultivar and stuff when I'm not a tea maker, right? I have been to the farms quite a bit, not nearly enough, but a little bit, right? But is it enough to compare? Of course not. But should we shy away from trying to? I think as long as we have a good attitude, I think we should definitely try to. Yeah. I think it's okay. I think a lot of the people who love tea knowledge, we kind of get a bad rap because there are some people who really like to only focus on knowledge only. It's like they open a book and never put it down, right? And I've been that person before. That's why I'm really aware of it, especially back then when there wasn't a lot of tea information around. There's like that, I wish we had that image, Steven. There's like a knowledge curve where you start, and then when you know a little bit, you think you know a lot. It's like you go from 0, I know nothing, and then after like 2 days of Wikipedia, you think you know everything. I see this because it happens to me in other things too. Like I got into succulents for a couple years. Like I had a succulent phase, and I'm like, oh, I can identify succulents by the look. I know what cultivar that is. I know where it's from. I know how to take care of it. And then you're there, and you think you know everything because you researched all the difficult issues on Reddit, you read the Wikipedia article, you look through all the forums, you follow all the people, and then you're like, wait, it's not working. Why are my succulents dying? I know everything about succulents. Why are they dying? I've rooted them correctly, I've trimmed the roots, I'm using the right soil, I bought the soil that Reddit told me to buy, it's like, I got all the stuff, I got all the gear. Why are they dying? I don't know why. And then you're like, wait, how come... Why do I know less now? And then, it goes down and you're like, oh my god, there's so much to learn, what the hell? And so you're staring back up at the mountain, And then it's at that point that you either decide, holy crap, I don't like being wrong, fuck this, or I guess I messed up, but you could do it this way. If I keep learning, I won't be wrong again, which I like, If you keep learning, that means in the future you'll be less wrong. Or it's just fun to be wrong, because when you're wrong, there's something you can test, there's something you can try out. I think that if someone's wrong, as long as they're willing to try something else, it's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Steven said it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So it's so intense sounding. Dunning-Kruger. How'd you find out about that effect? You just Googled it?
It's a known thing.
It's a known thing?
It's
okay.
established.
Yeah. That's me. I remember the first time I heard about high elevation, I was like, oh, this tea is sweet. It must be high elevation. You just think, right? Like, it makes sense because we want to know things. It feels good when we know things. But you know what feels even better? Being able to use the knowledge to, like, push the boundaries of it. That feels a lot better than knowing stuff. Yeah. So all of the stuff that I said, you know, like, yeah, it's just the stuff about the Japanese oolong. Yeah, we're just talking. That's why I like these conversations on Instagram and Discord. It's not like I have to make a post. I bet if I made a post about it, someone would be like, hey, Ree, what about this one Japanese oolong? And actually it's not. Just come over to our, tea chat and we'll talk about it. Yeah. Melon Marin, welcome to the chat. Drinking Buddha. Nihonsha Barista. Is that Taylor Japon? I forget which accounts are listed to other accounts. Nihonsha Barista. I think you're from a company, right? Which company do you have? Joe, welcome to Tea Practice today, day 39. We've been drinking this Japanese oolong. Which is actually really good. We've gotten a good 6 steeps from it, haven't we, Stephen? Yeah. Eric says we all have been wrong before and we will be wrong again. Yep, that's very true. As we're kind of going down the steeps with this oolong, let us know what you're sharing as well in your cups. Drinking, infusing. Okay. So overall, this Japanese oolong, it reminds me a little bit of like a baozong, like yours, Ronan. The leaves also look very baozong-like. I think the only thing throwing me off about it kind of not being baozong-like is the stems, which are very dansong or phoenix oolong-like. And the fragrance is very dansong-like, I would say. More than anything else. Yeah, so I'm guessing that this person probably went to like Taiwan. Taiwan and Japan have a very close relationship with each other. Taiwanese people really, really love Japanese culture, and Japanese people really like going to Taiwan for vacation and stuff. So I'm just guessing here. I'm thinking this person probably studied a little bit in Taiwan. It's just so baozong-like, you know? I don't know what cultivar this is. The vendor didn't tell me what it was. But it tastes very Japanese. And I think that's partially the processing, but also the place. I don't know where it's from either. We're in Japan. So I'm kind of like in the dark here. When you are buying these kinds of teas, the strange ones, I would highly recommend getting them with as much info as possible. So why I hope that we had Thé de Japon around is they're probably my favorite vendor for Japanese teas at the moment. Alongside with Tea Crane, I would say there are a couple others too. But they give you all the information about the tea, the cultivar, the region, the tea maker, even the background of the tea maker. It's funny that we talk a lot about stats, like, oh, the oxidation level, the roast level, etc. And then sometimes we're like, oh, I don't want to buy into the story of the tea. It's too much marketing or whatever. And there's some merit to that for sure. But if the person who's selling the tea can tell you a little bit about the personality of the tea maker, you can learn a lot about how the tea might turn out. So, you know, for example, again, with like let's use the pastry example again. If the pastry maker is very cerebral, thinky, you know, we hear about these celebrity chefs who are like, oh, he's a genius and he has such a good nose and his palate's so developed. He's a once in a generation genius. The kind of food he's gonna make is gonna be a little bit different from someone who's described as like, oh, he's super passionate. He has a really bad temper, but he really means well, you know, and like he learned about food from his grandma or his dad, and he wants to continue on the family legacy. Those two different stories, even if they're stories, those two people will make different tea. I say tea, but we're talking about pastries, right? So don't be afraid when there's a lot of just story going on. I know we've been burned before by like marketing, right? Like I'm from just that era when I was growing up in tea where we were consumers against marketing because like Tivana marketed to us. Tivana sold us on stories about monks and leaves picked under moonlight and virgins with golden scissors, you know. So there was that kind of like anti-marketing story movement away from that stuff where people were like, no, give me the information, just the processing, the cultivar, the region, etc., right? And then and then some vendors who are very like story focused kind of get, oh, you know, how old do they say the tree was, etc. You guys know all this. All this to say though, don't be afraid about reading into the story. If the story isn't too like mysticized, yeah. Man, we're just talking a lot. I wish I could share all of these things that I've learned with you guys and, you know, get to know what you guys have learned too, because I'm sure there's so many tips and tricks and stories and anecdotes that you had during your tea buying journeys, you know? Little things you picked up along the way. These are all just little things I picked up along the way, which is why I'm just trying to share with you as much as possible. Not because I think I know better, but because I hope it saves you some headache when you're trying to shop for tea. I've made so many mistakes shopping for tea. I've had so much bad tea. Yeah. And we're not rolling in money, so I want to get you guys the stuff that tastes good first and just get more value from it. Even if it's the same tea, having a little bit more knowledge, I think, helps understand it better. For example, Steven and I have gotten into like really nice wood scoops lately. I feel like I'm in the very beginning of the Dunning-Kruger scale here. This is from Mihai Tea Scoops. Congrats, Steven. For those of you who weren't there for the last time I talked about this, we were in Yosemite and we were driving and drinking milk because we bought milk while we were in California because California has really good milk compared to Vegas. We're in the desert and California is a farming state, right? So I was just drinking my milk in the car as we were driving to Yosemite on the way back from a tea conference, actually, this year. And Steven's like, hey, can you check my Instagram? Why? He's never on Instagram. If you see him on the chat, but he has nothing on Instagram. We're not really big social media people other than tea. And he says, hey, can you refresh it again? Can you check to see if my Wi-Fi is working? If the messages are not being received? I said, why? Just check it. And I'm like, what the hell? Steven never checks his social media. Come to find out, he was messaging Mihai Tea Scoops about the handmade scoops, and he really wanted this one because if you put it on the table, just tea design wise, it's quite beautiful. I like.
It's not gonna work on the light colored.
Oh yeah, it won't actually. Actually, you do like yeah. So if it's like a dark.
Normally,
background,
I use dark colored.
Yeah. It's like showing the leaves, like a light background to show the leaves, and then when you finish, when you have a chaha like this, a tea scoop, you put it down, right, on the tea table, backside up, and so it kind of like deactivates because it's dark. You're not going to look at it so much on a dark mat. And Steven's like, oh my god, look at the pattern and like the stuff like that, and I really like it. But I'm sure I would appreciate it more if I really knew more about wood. And that's why I want to just push all this like extra like tea stuff to you, because I'm like, man, every single tea now like is so, even no matter how bad or good it is, it's so interesting because we have so much data, we have so much knowledge, and we have our flavor library to look back on. Like, how does this compare to the other Japanese oolong that I had? How does it compare to other oolong? How does it, how is it? I find that it's easier to enjoy things and get more value out of them when you have the knowledge, just a little bit more information, And yeah, that's why. But anyway, Jason and Roigi and Sonia and 23 Acetol, welcome to the tail end of our tea practice today. We did last the whole session with the Japanese oolong, actually. It was very good. The end steeps are very tasty. The texture is really, really good. Yeah, really lovely. Really lovely. Is there a roast on it? No, there's no roast on it. Could it have been improved by a roast? I would say so. There's not a lot of roasting going on in Japan other than for hojicha. And they have, I believe, machines specifically for hojicha. So you can't put oolong through there. I think a lot of tea machines tend to have like a critical mass you need for them to work correctly. So I imagine these small batch oolongs would probably be kind of, I don't know. We're just talking. So yeah, let me take a chance to talk about tomorrow's live. It's the very last one that we'll do for our 40 days together. Can you believe it? It's been really fun. I hope that you guys have enjoyed our time together. Don't worry, we'll still be around once a week. I'm not sure which day yet. We'll be around once a week, back to a regular schedule. And then we're going to do twice a week during our challenges, which we have another one coming up. I'm going to announce that once we get the data out for Pour Challenge today. And yeah, tomorrow we're going to drink teas that me and Steven have made in Taiwan. Yeah, isn't that exciting? Maybe we'll break out some Nepal ones too. So we're going to drink teas that we've made. And let me tell you, I'm glad we did these teas first because I'm ragging so hard on this tea. I'm like, it's not perfect. But wait till you get a hold of me and Steven's tea. It's yeah. So we're going to taste the tea that we've made. There's a batch that I made, there's a batch that Steven made. We all picked it together as part of the Taiwan Tea Tour last year. I have a couple that I picked alone and made myself. So any flaws, any problems, flavors, aromas, we can actually explain why that happened because we were there for the entire processing. So this will be tomorrow will be a kind of processing heavy topic, you know, but I'll try my best to kind of condense it down. I don't like using too many technical terms to describe tea. But also, I'd like you to, I guess, see what it might be like when someone has made a tea and their thought process behind it. I'm not a tea maker, but if ever you do get a chance to talk to one, there's that. It's more than just, oh, I put it in for 30 seconds to get more heat into it. They actually have a story they want to tell through the tea. And I attempted to do that. My storytelling is not very good, you know, like my tea making is not good. So the story I told with my tea was, I'm a girl who likes tea and in theory knows how to process, but really doesn't. It's like a nailed it video where you do your best to read the instructions. You're like, okay, got it. Okay, sear it, okay, and then dehydrate it, cool. And then it just doesn't pan out. And we'll share that with you tomorrow. I'm really excited to talk about that tea. Not because it's going to be great, but it really did make me happy to make it. I'll do mine first. I'll do mine first, if that's okay. It's sure. The tea that I made last year for my birthday. My teacher, and her mom, also my teacher, Nai, grandma, allowed me to pick tea from their old tea farm back on my birthday. I was so happy. I was like, yes! Because the trees they're in Taiwan, and a lot of the Taiwanese tea trees are actually not very old. They like to cut them down, right? You've seen pictures of the Taiwanese tea trees bushes that are very small, and then the Yunnan, like pu'er trees, which are very tall. And most of the Taiwan ones are cut down. They're like monocultured, so it's okay, but it's not like the world's best leaf material to work with. But they have this garden that's been kind of abandoned for maybe 20 to 40 years in some places, and the trees are now taller than me. It's not that hard to be taller than me, but they're taller than most of us. They're pretty tall. Were they taller than you? I couldn't tell. So they're definitely taller than you. The ones in Ilan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The ones where we dragged Eric up the hill. Eric's like, oh, I don't want to walk up the hill. But yeah, we got to pick those, and the tea maker, the making sucks, but the leaves are gorgeous, and they just carry themselves. So I'm really excited to share that with you. I just have a tiny amount, and I'm excited. Then we'll drink some tea that we made with Matt from Mountain Stream Teas. And yeah.
Which was his first time making tea too.
His first time making tea as well. I wish we had some of his tea because...
The difference between person is
crazy.
The
difference from person to person is really interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about more of that stuff tomorrow. And Eric, you pick on me too much too. You call me a smartass on my own stream. People don't know we're friends, dude. They might actually think I'm a smartass. Okay, smartass out. See you guys for the last day tomorrow. I'm sad and happy. Bye. Oh my goodness.